City Matters.
Hello, and thank you for joining me today. I'm your host, Richard Acritelli, on today's episode of The Fog of War and Humanity here on HMTV. Sitting to my left is Mr. Joseph Joe Cognitore. Will join me for a nice conversation about his experiences as a combat platoon sergeant at the end of the Vietnam War and his long time in service as a commander of Post 6249 Rocky Point Veterans of Foreign Wars, and all of his local, state, and national efforts to always help our veterans today. Mr. Cognitore, it's very nice to see you today. Thank you for coming down here. Can you give me a brief background of where you grew up as a child?
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me. I grew up in Brooklyn and moved out of Brooklyn in 1960 out to Farmingdale, and went to high school back in Farmingdale.
Now, you're a Daler or a Daler? How do I say that correctly?
Daler would be the right way.
Daler would be the correct way. What were the things that you did in Farmingdale and in the high school there? You're an extremely busy man, so it didn't change over time. You're always youthful, as years ago.
Well, my main stress after leaving Brooklyn and playing in the schoolyards on concrete all the time, it was a big experience moving out to Farmingdale. They had gyms, they had fields, and I wound up playing football, track, believe it or not, high and low hurdles, and also wrestled a little.
Now, where did you go to college after graduating from Farmingdale? What year did you graduate?
Graduated in 1964 and wound up in Mitchell, South Dakota, Dakota Wesleyan University.
Okay. And now what did you do out there?
Well, basically, I wrestled a little, and also I wound up teaching a little bit of school out there while I was going to college a little out in Plankinton, South Dakota.
Now, is South Dakota a little bit different than Farmingdale?
Oh, yeah. Much, much, much different. And it was the 8th largest city, and Mitchell was the 8th largest city in South Dakota, and that was in the southeastern part of the state. And Highway 30 ran right through it, and from east and west, north and south, all farms.
Now, if you look back today, what are some of your reminders of going to school? The Big Sky, the Indian reservations?
Well, it was a great experience for me coming out of Brooklyn and Farmingdale. We had the Corn Palace, which was the Madison Square Garden of South Dakota, and I was fortunate enough to teach at Plankinton State Training School, as I said, and it was comprised mostly of individuals or students that did a little something wrong to get in. It was typically a reform school, but they weren't the hardcore students that should have been in there. They went in there to get 3 meals a day, a roof over their head, play sports, etc. So it was a different experience for me also.
Now, what kind of degree? It was teaching? Was it social studies, history?
History, social studies, yeah.
And what part of history do you like the best, or did you like
I
at that
always
time?
liked American history the best. And it was fortunate to be out in South Dakota because I've talked to and interviewed people that were original homesteaders from Nebraska. One of our professors, Leonard Genowin, he had interviewed with Sitting Bull and had a little museum on campus himself that he kept going.
Did you go on any battlefield tours out there, or drive by yourself, or with a couple of your teammates, or were they pretty noticeable?
Other than the Badlands, when we went out to the western part of the state for some games, that was basically it. But viewing the city of Spearfish and things like that was an experience. The Badlands were a huge experience out there.
Some beautiful but rough country.
Right. Yep. All different mountain strata and different colors, and it was a big eye opener.
Now, when you like going to college, you like the experience. What happened at the very end of your college career that kind of molded you for the rest of your life?
Well, fortunately, unfortunately, I always got letters from my mother and my father, and in one was my draft notice. So I had to negotiate that my senior year. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I took my physical out in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and I needed 1 credit to graduate. And what I did was I went home for the summer, worked, and came back for an additional semester.
And how is the government process in terms of you were drafted in the service for you? How is that a little bit different than maybe the average person from Long Island here?
Well, I could speak for myself. It was heartbreaking in the beginning because now, I'm ready to find a teaching job, maybe settle down and get married, things like that. All my 4.5 years of school was all completed. Planned on going to graduate school for my graduate degree, master's in education. And I wound up in Great Neck at the draft board in, I guess it was April of '69. And I was on the bus there going into Whitehall Street to get sworn in.
And it was always a mix-up with the paperwork, right, with the government, and between being out west and here. And
they got my paperwork right. I tell you that.
Either way, they got you.
Yeah,
right?
They got me. Yep.
So now, where did you? What year was this? And then where did you end up going to?
Well, it was 1969. I wound up going to Fort Gordon, Georgia, and for my basic training.
Now, what was your job? What would you be after basic infantry, right?
Well, right there, you just you do your 12, 13 weeks of training, and from there they categorize you, and basically everybody was going infantry and going probably to another camp called, we went to Fort Polk, Louisiana. And
what was in the middle of Fort Polk that you kind of knew that you were going to Southeast Asia if you ended up there?
Well, we got there at probably 12 o'clock at night, and we reported to our CQ. And the thing that I memorized the most when we were going through the gates of Fort Polk, they had a big sign overhead saying, "Through this threshold comes the future soldiers of Vietnam." So we knew we were going to Vietnam right then and there.
And now how long was that training there?
That was 12 weeks. 12 weeks at Fort Polk. And it was unbelievable. Myself, I was probably going through basic and advanced infantry training, probably the oldest, one of the oldest in my platoon.
You were an old man. College.
College, yep. Went to college at 17, so I was a little bit under the radar, but I was like 21 when I went in.
Now, a lot of your instructors at Tigerland, your military instructors from the Army, were they previously in Vietnam? So if they were there, were they a little bit harder on you?
I would say yes. And they had a lot of experience, and you didn't realize that at the time until you hit Vietnam or afterwards. The training that you received was, believe it or not, top notch. You didn't think about it at that time, but it saved lives. And if you did the right thing and listened to what they were saying and practiced what they preached, you came through pretty good.
Now, was there one thing that they emphasized the most to you in terms of going over to South Vietnam, in terms of the training?
Basically, follow the rules and regulations, and make sure that you were with a buddy and you looked after each other. And that was I would call it an unknown factor, that you always watched the person to your left and right, and they kept an eye on you. So it was always a buddy system.
That brotherhood. Right?
Brotherhood, yep.
So now you're in Tigerland. You graduate from there. Okay, you move on. When did you end up in South Vietnam? What year?
Well, I ended up, actually after Tigerland, I wound up in Fort Benning, Georgia. I went to NCO school there. It was a 12-week program, and I knew I was going overseas, so I wanted to go with some rank. And I completed my course in Fort Benning and became a sergeant, and then went over in 1970 into Vietnam.
Now, what part of South Vietnam did you originally go in the first time there?
Well, we arrived in Cam Ranh Bay, and from there they shipped us out to our different locales, and I had orders for An Khê, Central Highlands.
What was your first observations when you stepped in country? The weather, the people. What was it like there?
I was in shell shock, believe it or not. And actually, when I got into Cam Bay, we were walking toward the center where we were going to get processed, right by the airport there, and it started to get mortared. And me, being a rookie, a newbie, there was a small bench that I got under, and everybody was laughing. All the in-country guys were laughing, and I'm looking up, and here I am with my sergeant stripes under a little bench, and the guys yelling out, "They'll never hit this area. They're going to fall too short. You can get out of under the bench."
And you gave them a good laugh. Right?
Oh, I was embarrassed, but yeah. So they kind of realized then that even though I went to NCO school, I had a lot of experience with a lot of different schools and ranger training, I said to myself, I better pay attention to detail.
And learn from these guys that have been in country,
yep.
Right?
Yep.
So now, what was your operations? What was your job?
Our job was first of all from Cameron. That after that night, I went to Anke. The next morning, I was on a chopper with resupply equipment going out to my platoon and company, and my first ride on a chopper in country. And when I looked out, all I saw was all the guys clustered up, and I said, "That's not right. They're supposed to be 3 meters apart." But they were the experienced ones at the time. But they were getting the mailbag, basically some clothes, getting everything out of the choppers. And when I hit the ground, got introduced to the platoon sergeant, platoon leader, and our CO, and I was under the wing of my platoon leader.
Do you recall how many chopper flights that you made in and out of the jungle or out of the bases?
Yeah, I know I have, as for infantry, and most infantry people or soldiers don't have an air medal. I received an air medal, and in order to achieve an air medal, you did at least 26 combat assault missions. So I had more than, I'm going to say 50 flights at least in country.
Now, looking back today and remembering sitting up pretty high altitude and sitting in the helicopters, what do you recall from those moments? I mean, you're going into some hot zones, but when you're looking out.
Well, when you're looking out, first of all, I have to be up there a little bit to get comfortable. And after a while, I'm comfortable, but I was in awe, and I looked around inside the chopper. There were 2 pilots. We were in the back and didn't have many more than 4 to 5, I'm going to call them packs, guys going out, and the 2 door gunners, because you couldn't get that chopper loaded down because of the altitude. It had to be a little lighter. But I could never, ever, until today, not know how this helicopter stayed in the air. I mean, it's amazing, yeah.
What, just from the sheer weight of the soldiers, right? And the ammunition and
the fact
rucksacks,
that there's, when you're in an airplane, you can see the engines and stuff. When you're in a helicopter, the rotor's above you, and that's about it.
Wow.
And you don't, it's amazing how they fly, yeah.
Now, when you look at your base camps that you were at, were they pretty active places in terms of going out? Now, you guys were doing what, search and destroy missions?
Basically, we did search and destroy missions. We were out, I'm going to say 3 to 4, 5 weeks at a time, and we got the air mobile. We were lifted into different areas. In the Central Highlands, you'd be landing in the valleys and walking up the ridge lines into the top of the mountains and set up at night, set up a perimeter, put out guards, bunkered trip flares, claymore mines, and stand down at dusk, and in the morning you'd stand too, just to make sure that you weren't getting hit by the enemy that's most prone at that time. But basically that's what we did from ridge to ridge, and that was our day. We up and down the valleys and into the jungle.
Now, when you came across the enemy, was it through the jungles or tunnels, or how did you most likely come across? We
came across, we're in their territory. That's where they live and breathe. And basically, we would be search and destroy. So we were always moving during the day. and most of the time it was ambushed, things like, unless we had intel that told us that there was a bunker complex somewhere that we were going into. But most of the time, we would just get a grid on a map and just follow the contour map. And
who mostly were you going up against? The NVA, the North Vietnamese Army, or the Viet Cong, or a combination of both?
It was definitely a combination of both. There were times that we were in along the Highway 1, and they basically were NVA. And a lot of times in the jungles, on the mountains, they were VC from the local area. But the NVA was, you knew when you had NVA, they all had their, we're going to say, their stuff together. But when you captured or shot an NVA and took his equipment apart, it was all.
There was a difference between the two.
Yep, it was all. Everything was in its place. Everything was wrapped perfectly. Their ammo was wrapped. They had cosmoline around a lot of it, and they had their stuff together.
Now, I was wondering, did you have any, officers or sergeants that were there from the earlier part of Vietnam, the war, let's say the mid to late 1960s, compared to when you were there in 1970, 1971? Right. Was there a feeling that the NVA and the Viet Cong were fighting a little bit differently at that point?
I don't think so, because they were very aggressive. There was people don't realize it, but you talk about Tet, 68 Tet, and things like that. There was a Tet every year.
Yeah.
Every year they came down Highway 1, and after the first experience, we knew. Americans knew that what they were doing, so what they would try to do is stop it when they started. So they went into Highway 1 and bombed and pulled up big maneuvers in those areas, and actually forced the NVA to go further, I guess, to the east, and come down different paths and push them out of their comfort zone. And technically, they were into Cambodia, and that's where we went at the end of our tour.
What was it like for you to go into Cambodia?
Well, I'll be honest with you, probably didn't even know we were there. When we went on a mission, we would just get in the helicopter, and the CO and the officers would have their maps, and all it was a grid with 10 by 10 grid and contour map. And it didn't show you the Eiffel Tower, it didn't show you the Empire State Building. It was just green all over, and the elevations. And we didn't actually know where we were. And we, again, search and destroy. But then they finally told us that we were in Cambodia. And basically, our company hit in the mountain, a tunnel, and there was a staging area, and it was a hospital area. And based all their goods, their foods stored there, the bicycles, and a lot of hospital things that were there for their needs.
And going into Cambodia protected American soldiers, because you had the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
Yep.
They had almost a free movement to get in and out of South Vietnam. Yep. And even though it's at the end of the war, it was controversial under Nixon. What was he trying to do? He was trying to protect American lives, and
it pushed them further out and gave them an impetus to try to get back in, and we kept pushing them.
It was a little bit of a shock on their point,
exactly.
Right?
They had to change their tactics a little.
Change their tactics. Now, what do you remember from the Vietnamese people? What do you remember? How they lived or the conditions they were in? And
well, as far as I'm concerned, I didn't get into too much contact. We didn't hit any villages, thank God, in the jungles that I was in. But in the rear, every now and then we'd come back in for a day or two, and you were able to speak and be around some of the village people that worked on the LZs. And they were like anybody else. They were family oriented. They had religion. Most of them were Catholics. Were the area I was in the South, but
which is amazing, because you come here from Long Island and it's a large Catholic.
Yeah, and it was like anything else. But I felt for the villagers, because I knew from speaking and actually seeing things happen that, I mean, they were just living on the land. Yeah. They just wanted to be left alone and live, raise their families and their kids, raise the crops. And if the VC came in, they'd be friendly with the VC. If the Americans came in, they'd be friendly with the Americans. They didn't want to upset either one because that's where they lived.
Stuck between two larger factions.
Exactly.
Now, when did you come home from Vietnam?
I got, actually at the end of the year of 70, the 4th Infantry came home to the States. I had a few months left, and I was sent down to Benoit, further south, and I hooked up with I had a choice, regular line unit like I was at, or I was with the 1st Cav Recon Air Mobile. And when I talked to the clerk coming in, I said, what do they do? He says, well, they got their stuff together, and they're experienced. And if you go with a regular line unit, they come in and out, and they'll, I said, I know what that's like going through the jungle with them. So I'll go with the experienced. Mistake. I processed thin, and because I had the experience, I was actually an acting platoon leader and platoon sergeant with the 4th Infantry, filling in here and there. And when I got to the 1st Cav, the first thing I was doing was taking a 3-man team on a mission. And I wasn't used to that. We used to have 120 or 20 platoon size, 20 to 25 guys at a time. And going out with just myself and 2 other guys was a little hairy.
Yeah. Now, you go from hitting the deck early on, going in country, to towards the end of your tour, being one of the older guys, an experienced guy. You have rank. You've been decorated there as well. What was it like to talk to some of the younger guys coming into the country? Was it, you were saying that a lot of the same things that you heard at Tigerland or from older NCOs or officers that you came across?
Yeah, the basic thing is that the common denominator is we all wanted to go home. We wanted to make it through our year there, do what we had to do, and come home. And I know when I first came in as a sergeant, they knew I went to NCO school, so I was deemed shake and bake. And they put you through the test, and they make sure that I walked point, I walked rear, I did this, I did that. So, and I did it just to make sure that I got their confidence. And walking point is not an easy chore. You're walking with the M16 and the machete, and trying to make sure that the enemy is not in front of you.
What would you say about the jungle itself?
Rugged. In the 4th Infantry, we dug in every night. We had D-ring shovels, picks. We did not walk the paths. We always cut a path through the jungle. So we knew that if our chances are cutting through, that we weren't going to hit any enemy right then and there. And if we did hit an open area or area where there were, paths and stuff like that, we'd always put people out, scouts out to find out and look ahead, so we didn't just walk into a trap.
Now, you have many military decorations. What were some of them from your time in the service? Well,
I didn't know I got these. When I left Vietnam, I was the only one on the plane from my area going out. I didn't go out with a whole group. And I got home, and 10 years later, I got a packet from the government with all my medals, and I didn't even know what I received. Wow. They put them on me when I got to Oakland, and got my uniform. I came home, but the Bronze Star, 2 Bronze Stars, heroism, the Air Medal was there, Vietnam Medal, so things like that. Yeah.
But you wanted to get going with your life right after the war, and have your family, a home,
definitely,
job, right?
Yep.
And now, when did you get involved with the VFW?
Actually, I was joined. I didn't join. My father and uncle, World War II, in
Veterans,
Farmingdale,
right?
they put my name in, and I became a VFW member in 1973. I went into the VFW in Farmingdale once to borrow money from my father, and that was it. And the next thing, when the first Gulf War happened, I was in Rocky Point. I knew that the troops needed help, and or packages and assistance and stuff like that, and went down to the VFW in Rocky Point. And thanks to Senator Laval, we started a program doing goods to the troops, and never stopped since.
Now, can you identify a couple of things that you have done over the last, 10 years, 15 years?
Yeah, great accomplishments by our VFW and a lot of help from all our members. I was involved with 14 homes, handout homes to veterans that needed, families, new homes. Do a golf outing every year. We raise approximately 25 to 30,000.
And when was that started?
That was started 18 years ago.
18 years ago.
Yeah.
Seems like yesterday.
It seems like yesterday. A lot of work and a lot of dedication. And
what about historically? You being somebody that knows and respects and likes history, what are things that the Post has done to illustrate the importance of...
I think our most recent endeavor is our museum. We've done numerous things along the way. We put the 9/11 memorial up at the park in Brookhaven.
Diamond in the
Pines,
right?
and that was like $80,000 that we raised. We have a Joseph Dwyer statue in the middle of the town. Steel from the World Trade Center in about 4 or 5 of our monuments and around the school and different areas.
Now, Dwyer, how does that get connected with the run that is done?
Yeah, well,
at the end of May, early June.
Well, we consider Joseph Dwyer a hero from Mount Sinai. He died of his wounds when he got home, post-traumatic stress. So we do this every year to keep the reminder that post-traumatic stress is still there. There's 25 to 26 veterans dying a day. We got to keep the awareness out there. And it's not just veterans. It could be teachers, policemen, firemen, husbands, wives that have post-traumatic stress. And that statue is in the middle of town. And we do the 5K to reinforce that every May and raise a little money for the Joseph Dwyer program that helps those that need help.
The one gentleman is right, Frank Caselta, who's been good with the run over the last couple of years.
Unbelievable, yeah. He's the chair for the 5K, and this will be our 3rd year, and he's done a fantastic job every year, raising dollars and for Joseph Dwyer. The Post doesn't keep any of those dollars coming in.
And then Mike Morrow with the golf outing.
Mike Morrow was originally he was our go-to guy for the golf outing. He got it started. Unfortunately, he moved to North Carolina, and we miss him terribly, but we continue that on.
Well, Joe, thank you very much for coming to HMTV. It's a pleasure being with you today.